Hey guys, welcome back to another semi ad hoc version of the Rule of Law Brief. Today I want to talk plainly about the SAVE Act. All right, this is the bill that would require documentary proof of U.S. citizenship, a passport, birth certificate, or naturalization papers in order to register to vote in federal elections. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. Only U.S. citizens should be able to vote. No serious person disputes that. But legislation isn't judged by how it sounds, it's judged by what problems it solves and what consequences it creates. So let's start with the problem. The claim behind the SAVE Act is that non citizens are voting in federal elections in meaningful numbers. And that's just not true. There is hard data to show that documented cases of non citizen voting are extraordinarily rare. It's not zero, but it's vanishingly small. Across tens of millions of ballots cast in recent federal elections, confirmed cases of voter fraud typically number in the dozens. Fractions of a percent, so small they are statistically insignificant. There is no credible evidence that non citizen voting has changed the outcome of any federal election. So we're not looking at a systemic crisis. We're looking at an anecdotal issue. Now let's look at the remedy. Under the SAVE Act, registering to vote would no longer require just attestation under penalty of perjury, which is already a federal crime to falsify. It would require producing documentary proof of citizenship. I mean, that sounds simple until you think about what real life is like. Millions of Americans do not have a passport. Most Americans do not have a passport. Many do not have a certified copy of their birth certificate readily available, and replacing those documents costs money and time. It requires onerous bureaucracy. And here's the key point. That burden is not evenly distributed. If you have a flexible job, disposable income, reliable transportation, stable housing, and easy access to government offices, the SAVE Act would be merely an inconvenience. But if you're working hourly shifts, if you're juggling two jobs, if you're a single parent, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you live far from document offices, these are not small hurdles. Political science has shown us for decades that when you add friction to voting, participation drops. That's not a partisan talking point. It's empirically true. And participation doesn't drop evenly. Higher income, older, more stable voters tend to navigate document requirements more easily. Lower income and younger voters face greater logistical and financial hurdles. Those demographic patterns also correlate with partisan voting behavior. You don't even need to speculate about secret motives to understand the structural incentives. If one coalition is less burdened by new requirements and the other coalition is more burdened, the electoral consequences are predictable. So the real question becomes this. If the documented rate of non-citizen voting is almost infinitesimal, why impose a nationwide documentary requirement that will make registration harder for millions of lawful citizens? That's why critics describe the SAVE Act as a solution looking for a problem. In a democracy, we balance two values, preventing fraud while simultaneously maximizing lawful participation. When the fraud is already microscopic and the response risks suppressing legitimate participation at scale, skepticism of the policy isn't radical. It's entirely rational. Only citizens should vote. That's not controversial. But the controversy is whether we should restructure the registration process nationwide in response to a problem that empirical audits show barely exists, knowing that the burden will fall hardest on the people least able to absorb it. That's the debate that we actually need to be having.